All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into this collection of like essays and analyses, and it's all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's philosophy and psychology and politics,
Uh-huh.
pop culture, even physics. And our mission is
What?
to kind of help the author come up with some fresh, exciting new directions for their work.
I like it, so we're like idea detectives.
Exactly.
That's great.
So let's start with a quick overview. I guess we've got analyses of movies and shows like Ghost in the Shell,
Okay.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Harry Potter, talk about range, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the deep dives into Lacan and Zizek, which are always a wild ride.
Always fun.
And there's this one piece that's particularly mind-bending. It's about how entropy is like sacrifice. And then somehow that all relates back to this thing called objectivity.
We'll definitely need to break that down for everyone. But as we go through all this,
Yeah.
let's keep in mind like the recurring themes in the author's work.
Okay.
But things like symbolic versus real, the role of the phallus, and this interplay of authorization and embodiment. And these are kind of our compass points,
Yeah.
guiding us toward potential new territories.
Okay, so let's jump into a specific example then. One that really struck me was this analysis of mutants in superhero stories.
Okay.
You know how the good guys usually use their powers to fight crime or save the world?
Right. It's almost a cliche at this point.
Yeah, well, the author is pointing to a different kind of freedom, like a more playful
Okay.
and creative expression of power. And they highlight this one scene
Uh-huh.
where two mutants discover they can create an aurora borealis together.
Wow.
Pure joy, not about some obligation or duty.
So what's fascinating here is like the potential that the author's hinting at, this world where extraordinary abilities are used for our exploration, pure enjoyment,
Yeah.
Imagine if society actually encouraged this instead of just focusing on how to use these powers to fight.
Totally.
Yeah.
What if the author explored how society could be designed to nurture this? Like a utopia for mutants where their powers are celebrated for their artistic potential.
Well, that's a brilliant insight, and it speaks to this larger theme that runs through all these writings, this idea of subversion through enjoyment. So it's not about rejecting power.
Right.
It's about using it in unexpected and delightful ways.
I love that. And speaking of subversion, there's this other analysis of a love story.
Okay.
And it's about this police officer that falls for a criminal.
Oh, wow.
She ends up choosing her lover over her duty.
Interesting.
She even kisses her captor.
It's a dramatic example of how love can disrupt our expected roles, and challenge societal norms.
Totally. It makes you wonder, how often do we see this tension between love and duty in our own lives?
Yeah.
Like what happens when our desires clash with social expectations
Yeah.
or even the law?
It's a rich area for the author to mine. Imagine like a deep dive into the complexities of love and transgression, where the boundaries between right and wrong, duty and desire, they all become blurred.
Ooh, I'm already hooked on that one.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenging norms, there's this really intriguing concept the author introduces.
Okay.
They call it feminine logic.
Feminine logic.
Yeah, it's presented as an alternative way of thinking about truth and falsehood,
Okay.
but it's all tied up with the structure of desire.
So if we unpack this a bit, it seems like the author is suggesting there are different ways of approaching knowledge and reason,
Okay.
and that these different approaches might be connected to our gendered experiences. They're linking feminine logic to the very core of language and signification, and they're challenging the traditional, maybe masculine ways we construct meaning.
So it's not just about a different type of logic.
Right.
It's about questioning how we understand and interpret the world.
Absolutely. That's what makes it so radical, and this is where it gets really exciting. Imagine the author exploring the implications of feminine logic in all these different fields.
Yeah.
How might it change our understanding of relationships or politics?
Wow.
Could it even lead to new scientific discoveries? The possibilities are endless.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
But before we get too lost in the theoretical stratosphere, let's bring things back down to earth.
Okay.
With this other piece that caught my eye, it talks about a society that prioritizes full employment,
Oh, interesting.
even if those jobs aren't super productive in the traditional sense.
So the emphasis here is on the dignity of work,
Yeah.
on fostering a sense of belonging and social connection. So everyone has a job, everyone feels valued,
Right.
everyone contributes to the community.
It's a complete reframing of how we view work. What if it wasn't just about economic output,
Right.
but about fostering social cohesion and a sense of purpose?
Imagine a world where work wasn't just about earning a living, but about building relationships, learning new skills, and contributing to something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
What if the author explored this concept further?
Okay.
Imagining a society where the dignity of labor is central to its very fabric. It could be a powerful critique of our current obsession with productivity and efficiency.
That's a brilliant idea, and it connects to another intriguing point the author makes.
Okay.
They seem kind of disillusioned with the idea of another world as possible, which you hear a lot these days.
Yeah.
Instead, they propose that what we really need is a good mirror.
That's a provocative statement. What does it even mean to have a good mirror?
Right.
What kind of mirrors would help us see ourselves and our world more clearly,
Yeah.
without the distortions of ideology or wishful thinking?
Could art be a mirror? Or philosophy?
Maybe.
Maybe even something like AI, which can process vast amounts of data and reflect back patterns we might not even be aware of.
These are all fantastic questions. It seems like the author's pointing to this need for introspection, for tools that allow us to examine our assumptions, our biases, and the very structures of reality.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like we're onto something here, from mutant freedom to the philosophical implications of feminine logic.
I know, right?
From the dignity of work to the search for a good mirror, it seems like we've uncovered a whole network of interconnected ideas.
Yeah.
Each with the potential to spark a new direction for the author's work.
Absolutely. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg,
Yeah.
As we continue to explore these writings, I'm sure we'll uncover even more intriguing connections and potential pathways.
I can't wait. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a closer look at another fascinating thread that runs through these writings.
Okay.
One that touches on the very foundations of how we understand the world.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more. You're talking about the author's engagement with the concepts of masculinity and femininity?
Exactly. There's this one passage where they talk about the masculine and feminine implications of logic, and they link it back to the structure of desire.
Oh, okay.
Like it challenges how we even perceive knowledge and reason.
Yeah, what's interesting is how the author goes beyond just abstract philosophical concepts.
Okay.
They actually connect this masculine and feminine dynamic to this interplay of authorization and embodiment. They argue that these ideas have real-world consequences in how power is actually structured and exercised.
So it's not just about these abstract philosophical ideas.
Right.
It's about how they actually manifest in the social and political dynamics of our lives.
Precisely. And I think this opens up a multitude of potential avenues for the author to explore.
Yeah.
Imagine them examining how these masculine and feminine principles play out in art and politics, even in the structure of language itself.
That's a brilliant point. It's like we're giving the author a whole new set of lenses to examine the world with.
Exactly. And with those lenses, they could uncover hidden connections, challenge existing power structures, and maybe even offer a new vision for a more equitable and fulfilling society.
I love how these insights just keep building on each other.
Me too.
And speaking of building, there's another key element that shows up in a lot of these writings.
It's
this concept of sacrifice.
Yes, it weaves through so many of these analyses,
Right.
often connecting seemingly disparate ideas.
For example, there's this discussion of entropy as a form of sacrifice, which then gets linked back to this Lacanian concept of object petit.
To unpack that a bit, object petit is this really intriguing concept that represents the unattainable object of desire.
Okay.
So it's that carrot on a stick, always just out of reach.
Yeah.
And the author connects this to entropy.
Okay.
Which is the idea that everything in the universe is moving toward disorder, which could be seen as a kind of sacrifice, like a letting go of order and structure.
Okay, that's a lot to process, but I think I'm getting it. So how does this relate to sacrifice in our everyday lives?
Well, think about it this way. What do we sacrifice in our daily lives? Our time, our energy, maybe even our dreams.
Yeah.
And how does this constant sacrificing relate back to this elusive object of desire, this thing that we're always striving for but never quite reach?
Whoa, that's deep. I could see how this could be like a springboard for a whole new line of inquiry for the author.
Imagine a deep dive into the social and personal implications of sacrifice. What do we actually give up, consciously or unconsciously, to maintain like the systems and structures we live within?
Yeah.
What if the author explored the hidden costs of our choices and whether those sacrifices are actually necessary,
Right.
or if there might be alternative paths that lead to a more fulfilling and equitable existence?
Now, that's a deep dive I'd sign up for. And you know what else has me hooked?
What's that?
It's the author's analysis of popular culture.
Oh, yeah.
They don't just watch movies and TV shows, they like dissect them.
Right. They use these narratives as lenses to examine complex philosophical concepts and social dynamics. It's a brilliant way to make those ideas like accessible and relatable.
Like, for example, their analysis of Ghost in the Shell.
Okay.
They talk about how the film explores themes of mourning and the search for truth, and they tie it back to those Lacanian concepts of the symbolic and the real.
So it adds like a whole new layer of depth to the film.
Yeah.
But it also shows the author's ability to connect these seemingly disparate works. They're highlighting these like universal philosophical questions that pop up in all sorts of unexpected places.
It's like they're showing us that philosophy isn't just this stuffy academic pursuit.
Right.
It's actually woven into the fabric of our lives,
Yeah.
even in our entertainment.
Exactly. And speaking of weaving, another thread that runs through these writings is the author's focus on language and signification.
Right. There's this part where they talk about the arbitrariness of the signifier and how our enjoyment actually plays a role in determining meaning.
Okay.
They bring in Saussure and Lacan to make this point,
Right.
highlighting how language can be both a tool for communication, but also a source of ideology and power.
So it's crucial for understanding how language can be used to manipulate and control, but also how it can be used to liberate and empower. Imagine the author like exploring this duality further. What if they dove into the ways language is used to shape our perceptions, to create social norms, and even to construct entire belief systems?
That's a fascinating idea. It's like they're giving us this decoder ring for understanding the hidden messages embedded in the language we use every day.
Exactly. And with that decoder ring, we can start to see the world in a whole new light, to question the narratives we've been told, and to create new narratives that are more just and equitable.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
It seems like the author is constantly challenging us to think critically,
Yeah,
to question our assumptions, and to look beyond the surface of things.
absolutely. And I think that critical lens is what makes their work so compelling. They're not just offering answers, you know?
Right.
They're inviting us to join them on a journey of intellectual discovery.
And speaking of journeys, there's another theme that pops up in these writings.
Oh, yeah.
It's the concept of crisis.
Right. And it appears in many different contexts.
Yeah.
From social and political upheavals to personal struggles and breakthroughs.
There's this one passage where they talk about crisis as the fall of fetishes. Like the shattering of those identifications we thought were natural and normal.
Okay.
It's like everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world just falls apart.
That's a really powerful image. And the author suggests that this breakdown can actually be a transformative experience.
Okay.
It can be painful and disorienting, you know, even terrifying, but it can also create space for new possibilities,
Right.
for a more authentic way of being in the world.
It's like the old saying, out of the ashes.
Exactly. Crisis can be a catalyst for growth,
Uh-huh.
both personal and societal. Imagine the author exploring this concept further.
Okay.
What if they examine how different cultures and societies have like navigated periods of crisis?
Yeah.
How have those experiences shaped our values, our beliefs, our understanding of what it means to be human?
That's a really intriguing question, and it leads us to another key theme.
What's that?
This idea of the new... new ideas, new perspectives,
Okay.
new ways of organizing ourselves and our societies.
It seems like the author is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible,
Yeah.
urging us to think outside the box
Uh-huh.
and to envision a future that's more just and equitable and fulfilling.
It's like they're saying, don't settle for the status quo.
Right.
Dare to imagine something better, and then work to make that vision a reality.
Exactly. And I think this is where the author's work could truly take flight. Imagine them exploring different models for social and political organization,
Okay.
drawing on historical examples, philosophical insights,
Yeah.
even science fiction, to create a compelling vision of what a better future could look like.
That's a brilliant idea. It's like they're giving us a blueprint for a more just and equitable world.
I like that.
And speaking of blueprints, let's delve into another crucial aspect of their work.
You mean their engagement with psychoanalytic theory?
Precisely. It's like they have this secret decoder ring for the human psyche. And they're using it to unlock the hidden meanings behind our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Their work draws heavily on Lacan and Zizek,
Right.
which can be pretty dense and challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
They use these insights to illuminate not just individual psychology, but also broader social and political phenomena.
For instance, they have this fascinating discussion of the four discourses.
Right.
This Lacanian framework for analyzing how knowledge is produced and circulated in society.
It highlights the power dynamics at play, showing how our desires and anxieties can be manipulated and exploited.
It's like they're pulling back the curtain on a wizard.
Yeah.
Revealing the hidden mechanisms of power that operate behind the scenes.
And speaking of revealing,
they
also delve into the concept of the symptom, not just in individuals, but in entire societies.
Interesting.
It's not just a problem to be solved, but a potential source of knowledge and transformation.
Okay.
If we're willing to look closely enough.
It's almost like the symptom is trying to tell us something, if we can just learn to listen.
Exactly. And it brings us to another key aspect of their work, one that underpins their entire approach.
You're talking about the unconscious.
Yes. They're constantly reminding us that there's more going on beneath the surface than we're often aware of. And if we want to understand ourselves and the world, we need to be willing to confront those hidden forces that shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
It's like they're saying, don't be afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
There's a whole universe of fascinating and important stuff going on down there if you're brave enough to explore it.
I love that. And speaking of exploration, there's another area where their ideas could really shine. It's the relationship between technology and humanity.
Okay.
It's something that everyone's talking about these days.
Right.
But they bring a really unique perspective to the conversation.
They go beyond the usual techno-optimism or techno-pessimism.
Right.
Instead, they offer this really nuanced and thought-provoking analysis of how technology is actually shaping our lives.
For better and for worse.
Exactly like that passage where they talk about the potential for AI to act as a good mirror.
Okay.
Reflecting back to us our own biases, assumptions, even our unconscious desires.
It's a compelling idea, but also a little bit unsettling.
Totally.
It raises all sorts of questions about the ethics of AI and how we can ensure that these powerful tools are used for good, not for harm.
Exactly. And I think this is an area where the author's work could make a really valuable contribution. Imagine them delving deeper into the social, political, and philosophical implications of AI. What does it mean for our understanding of ourselves? Our relationship to the world. Even the future of humanity.
Now that's a deep dive I'd definitely be tuning into.
And speaking of tuning in, let's shift our focus to another issue that's close to the author's heart.
You're talking about their interest in working class pride.
Yes.
And the challenges of creating a society where everyone feels valued and engaged.
Exactly, regardless of their occupation.
It's a recurring theme that speaks to the author's deep commitment to social justice and equity. They're not just interested in these abstract philosophical ideas. They're concerned with the lived experiences of real people. Especially those who are often marginalized and exploited.
Like their discussion of full employment, for example.
Okay.
They present this idea not just as an economic policy, but as a vision for a more humane and fulfilling way of life.
So everyone has a job.
Yes.
Everyone contributes, and everyone feels this sense of dignity and purpose.
It's a powerful alternative to the current system. Which so often leaves people feeling alienated. Disposable and undervalued.
Imagine the author exploring this concept further.
Okay.
What would a society based on full employment actually look like? How would it be structured? What kind of work would people be doing? How would it affect our relationships, our communities, our sense of self?
Those are great questions. It's like they're challenging us to envision a world where work isn't just about making a living, but about making a life. A life that is meaningful, fulfilling, and connected to a larger community.
And that sense of connection runs throughout these writings. The author clearly believes that we are social creatures. That we need each other to survive and thrive.
It's like they're saying we're all in this together. And it makes me wonder, what are the specific ways that we can build stronger, more resilient communities? In a world that so often feels fragmented and divided.
That's a great question, and I think it's one that the author is well equipped to explore. They have this deep understanding of social and political dynamics,
Right.
but they also have this real empathy for human experience.
And that combination of intellect and empathy is what makes their work so compelling.
Absolutely.
They're not just offering these abstract theories.
Right.
They're grappling with real-world issues, and they're doing it in a way that is both thought-provoking and deeply human.
Exactly. And I think this is just the beginning of our journey as we continue to explore these writings.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll uncover even more intriguing insights and potential pathways.
I'm ready for the next leg of the adventure.
Me too.
But before we move on, let's just take a moment to acknowledge the sheer breadth and depth of the material we've covered so far.
I know, right?
I mean, we've gone from mutants to entropy, from love triangles to the unconscious,
Yeah.
from AI to working-class pride,
Yeah.
and it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
It's like we've been given this key to a vast and intricate library,
Right.
and we've only just started to explore its shelves.
And speaking of libraries, there's another aspect of the author's work that I think is really important to highlight.
You mean their engagement with the world of literature?
Exactly. They're not just a philosopher,
Right.
they're also a literary critic.
Yeah.
And they bring this really unique perspective to their analysis of novels, poems, and plays.
Right. They use these works of art as lenses
Yeah.
to examine the complexities of human experience,
Right.
to explore our deepest desires and fears, and to challenge our assumptions about the world.
Like, for example, their analysis of Hamlet.
Okay.
They go beyond like the usual interpretations of the play,
Uh-huh.
offering this really fascinating reading that connects Hamlet's struggles
Okay.
with indecision and inaction to broader social and political anxieties.
It's like they're showing us that these classic works of literature are still relevant today,
Yeah.
that they can speak to our own experiences
Right.
and help us to make sense of the world we live in.
I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of relevance, another thread that runs through their work is this focus on the concept of history.
They seem to be suggesting that we can't understand the present without understanding the past.
Right.
That the events and ideas of history continue to shape our lives in really profound ways.
Exactly. And they're not just interested in like dry historical facts and dates.
Right.
They're interested in the stories we tell ourselves about the past
Yeah.
and how those stories shape our understanding of who we are and where we're going.
Like their discussion of the French Revolution,
Okay.
they go beyond those usual narratives of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but
Right.
bring a more nuanced and complex understanding of this pivotal historical event.
It's like they're showing us that history is not this static, unchanging thing,
Right.
but a living, breathing process of interpretation and reinterpretation.
And that process of interpretation is something that we all participate in,
Yeah.
whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. We're all historians in a way, constantly weaving together these narratives about the past
Yeah.
to make sense of the present and to imagine the future.
And I think this is where the author's work could make a really valuable contribution.
Okay.
Imagine them delving deeper into the relationship between history, memory, and storytelling. How do we construct these narratives about the past?
Right.
What are the power dynamics at play?
Yeah.
And how can we actually use those narratives to create a more just and equitable future?
Those are fantastic questions. And it makes me think about another key element of the author's work,
Okay.
their focus on this concept of truth.
Ah, yes. It's a complex and elusive concept.
Right.
One that has fascinated philosophers for centuries.
Yeah.
And the author is not afraid to grapple with that complexity. They're not offering any easy answers,
Right.
but they are providing us with some really valuable insights
Right.
into the nature of truth and its relationship to power language and belief.
Like, for example, their discussion of the concept of ideology.
Okay.
They go beyond those usual definitions of ideology as a set of false beliefs,
Right.
and they offer this more nuanced understanding
Yeah.
of how our beliefs are shaped by the social and political structures we live within.
It's like they're showing us that we can't just take our beliefs for granted, that we need to be willing to examine them critically
Yeah.
and consider how they might be serving to reinforce existing power dynamics.
And that critical examination of our beliefs is something that they encourage throughout their work.
Mhm.
They're constantly challenging us to question our assumptions,
Right.
to look at the world from different perspectives,
Yeah.
to be willing to change our minds when presented with new evidence.
It's like they're saying, don't be afraid to be wrong. The pursuit of truth is this messy and often uncomfortable process.
Right.
But it's essential for intellectual growth and for creating a more just and equitable world.
And that pursuit of truth takes us to another fascinating area that the author could explore.
What's that?
It's the relationship between science and society.
They've already touched on this a bit in their discussion of AI.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much more they could delve into. How does science shape our understanding of the world?
Right.
What are the ethical implications of scientific advancements? And how can we ensure that science is used for the benefit of all,
Right.
not just for the privileged few?
Those are great questions. And it makes me think about another key element of their work.
Okay.
Their focus on the individual versus the collective.
Ah, yes. That's a tension that runs through all of their writings.
Yeah.
They clearly believe in the importance of individual freedom and autonomy, but they also recognize that we are all interconnected,
Right.
that our choices and actions have an impact on others.
Exactly. So how do we balance these two seemingly competing values? How do we create a society that respects individual rights while also fostering this sense of shared responsibility and community?
That's a really challenging question.
Right.
But I think it's one that the author is well equipped to explore. They have a deep understanding of both philosophy and psychology.
Right.
And they're able to bring those insights together in a way that is both thought-provoking and deeply human.
And that brings us to another key theme that runs throughout their work.
Oh, yeah.
The importance of empathy.
They seem to be suggesting that empathy is not just this nice-to-have quality, but a crucial ingredient for creating more just and compassionate world.
Exactly. It's about being able to see the world from another person's perspective.
Yeah.
To understand their experiences.
Right.
To feel their pain.
And it's not just about feeling sorry for people. It's about taking action. About using our understanding of others' experiences to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
I love that. And speaking of thriving, another thread that runs through their work is this focus on the concept of happiness.
They seem to be suggesting that happiness is not just this fleeting emotion, but a state of being that we can cultivate through our choices and actions.
And they're not offering any easy answers or quick fixes. Either.
Yeah.
They're grappling with the complexities of human experience. And they're recognizing that happiness is not like this one-size-fits-all proposition.
It's about finding what truly matters to us.
Right.
And then living our lives in alignment with those values.
I love that. And speaking of alignment, another key element of their work is this focus on the importance of integrity.
Yes, they seem to be suggesting that integrity is not just about being honest. It's about being whole, about living in accordance with our deepest values and beliefs.
Exactly. And it's not always easy to do that.
Right.
Especially in a world that often rewards dishonesty and hypocrisy and self-interest.
But the author seems to be arguing that integrity is essential for personal fulfillment and for creating a more just and equitable world.
And that brings us to another key theme that runs throughout their work.
What's that?
This importance of meaning and purpose.
Yes. They seem to be suggesting that we all have this longing for meaning, this desire to feel like our lives matter, and that we're making a positive contribution to the world.
Exactly. And it makes me wonder, how do we find meaning and purpose in a world that often feels meaningless and absurd?
That's a really challenging question, but it's one that I think the author is well equipped to explore. They have this deep understanding of both philosophy and psychology.
Right.
And they're able to bring those insights together in a way that is both thought-provoking and deeply human.
And that brings us to another key element of their work.
Okay.
Their focus on the relationship between the individual and the cosmos.
Ah, yes. They seem to be suggesting that we're not just these isolated individuals, but part of something much larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Something that connects us to the vastness of the universe and to the mystery of existence.
It's a beautiful and awe-inspiring idea.
It is.
And it makes me wonder, what is our place in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
What is our purpose? How can we live our lives in a way that's aligned with the rhythms of the cosmos?
Those are big questions,
right?
But I think they're ones that the author would be really excited to explore.
They have this real sense of wonder and curiosity about the world.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to tackle the big questions.
Right.
The ones that have always fascinated and challenged humanity.
And that fearless pursuit of knowledge is what makes their work so compelling.
I agree.
They're not just offering us answers. you know?
Right.
They're inviting us to join them on this journey of intellectual discovery.
Yeah.
A journey that can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, the world, and our place in it all.
And that journey, my friend, is the greatest adventure of all.
Absolutely. But before we get too lost in the cosmic abyss, let's bring things back down to earth for a moment.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the author's engagement with political theory and their analysis of the challenges facing our societies today.
Yes, this is a thread that runs through all their writing.
Yeah.
And it speaks to their deep concern for social justice and the future of humanity.
Right.
They're not just like armchair philosophers.
Yeah.
They're actively engaged in the struggle for a better world.
And their work is informed by a deep understanding of the historical and political forces that shape our lives.
Like their discussion of the concept of revolution, for example.
Okay.
They present this idea not just as a violent overthrow of the existing order,
Right.
but as a fundamental transformation of our ways of thinking and being.
It's about challenging those structures of power and oppression and creating a society that is more equitable, more humane. And they're not afraid to get their hands dirty, so to speak. They're willing to engage with those messy realities of political struggle, to offer concrete suggestions for how to create positive change.
Like their analysis of working class pride, for example.
Okay.
They offer a nuanced and insightful perspective on the challenges of building solidarity and creating a movement that can effectively challenge the power of capital.
Right. It's not just about empty slogans or abstract ideals. It's about understanding the lived experiences of those who are most affected by injustice and building a movement that is grounded in their needs and aspirations.
And that grounding in lived experience takes us to another fascinating avenue the author could explore.
Okay, what's that?
This concept of intersectionality.
Intersectionality.
Yeah, they touch on this idea in several pieces, often in relation to their discussions of gender, race, and class.
Right. They seem to be suggesting that these different forms of oppression are not isolated phenomena, but rather like interconnected systems of power that reinforce and perpetuate each other.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our identities are complex and multifaceted, and that we experience the world in different ways depending on our social location.
And it's about understanding that true social justice requires a holistic approach, one that addresses the root causes of inequality and oppression in all their forms.
Okay, my head is spinning with possibility.
I know, right?
It feels like the author is giving us this framework for understanding the complexities of power and oppression, and a roadmap for building a more just and equitable world.
And that roadmap is not like a fixed path.
Right.
It's an ongoing journey of exploration, experimentation, and collaboration.
Right. It's about being willing to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
To adapt to changing circumstances and to work together to create a future that is worthy of our shared humanity.
And that collaboration takes us to another area where the author's work could be incredibly impactful.
Okay.
It's their exploration of the concept of community.
Yes, this is a recurring theme that speaks to the author's deep belief in the power of human connection.
Right. They seem to be suggesting that we're not meant to go through life alone, that we need each other to survive and thrive.
And they're not just talking about like sentimental notions of togetherness.
Right.
They're interested in the ways that communities can actually organize themselves to achieve common goals.
Like their discussion of the concept of the commons.
Okay.
You know, they offer this compelling vision of a world where resources are shared and managed collectively.
For the benefit of all.
It's a powerful alternative to the individualistic ethos that dominates our current society.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And that our well-being depends on the well-being of others.
Okay. My heart is swelling with a sense of possibility.
Mine too.
It feels like the author is giving us a glimpse of a world where cooperation and solidarity are not just ideals, but lived realities.
And that reality is not some distant utopia.
Right.
It's something we can start building right now in our own communities.
But before we get too carried away with our communal dreams, let's take a step back and acknowledge the challenges of actually creating and sustaining these strong communities.
Right.
You know, in a world that often seems to prioritize division and competition.
Yes, that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
It's not easy to build trust and solidarity in a society that is so fragmented and atomized.
And that's where the author's work could be so valuable.
How so? Imagine a deep dive into the principles and practices of community building.
Okay.
drawing on historical examples and contemporary movements
Yeah.
to offer a guide for those who are seeking to create more connected and resilient communities.
That would be an amazing resource.
Yeah.
It's about offering practical tools and strategies
Mm-hmm.
for fostering communication collaboration and a shared sense of purpose.
Mm. And it's also about recognizing the importance of diversity and inclusion. Strong communities aren't homogenous. They embrace and celebrate the differences that make us unique.
Precisely. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels welcome, valued, and empowered to contribute their talents and perspectives.
Okay, I'm feeling incredibly inspired right now. It
Yeah.
feels like the author is giving us this vision for a world where community is not just a nostalgic ideal, but a vibrant and essential part of our lives.
And that vision is not some pie-in-the-sky fantasy. It's something we can start creating right now by building relationships, fostering trust, and working together to achieve those common goals.
And that work of building relationships takes us to another fascinating avenue. The author could explore the nature of love.
Yes, this is a theme that emerges in several pieces, often in unexpected ways.
Right, they're not just talking about romantic love. They're also interested in that broader spectrum of human connection and affection.
Like their discussion of the concept of friendship, for example.
Okay.
They present this idea not just as a casual social bond, but as a profound form of love that can sustain us through life's challenges.
It's about recognizing the importance of mutual support, shared values, and a deep sense of care and concern for the well-being of another person.
And they're also interested in exploring the darker side of love,
Uh-huh.
the ways it can be twisted and distorted into forms of possessiveness, jealousy, and even violence.
Like their analysis of the concept of the love triangle, for example.
Exactly.
They offer a fascinating interpretation of this classic literary trope, revealing those hidden power dynamics and the psychological complexities that often underlie seemingly simple romantic relationships.
It's about understanding that love isn't always a force for good, that it can be both a source of joy and a source of pain.
Okay, my heart is both warmed and a little bit chilled by that analysis.
Hmm.
It feels like the author is inviting us to confront that full spectrum of human emotion.
Yeah.
The light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow.
And that confrontation with the full spectrum of our emotions can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationships.
Right. It's about recognizing that love is not this simple, straightforward emotion, but a complex and often messy tapestry of feelings and desires.
And it's about being willing to navigate that complexity with honesty, compassion, and a willingness to learn and grow.
Okay, I'm officially ready to dive into the depths of love and all its complexities.
Mm.
But before we get too lost in the labyrinth of human emotion, let's bring things back to a more practical level for a moment.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the author's interest in the concept of work
Mm-hmm.
and the challenges of finding meaning and purpose in our labor, in a world that so often seems to prioritize profit over people.
Yes. This is a recurring theme that speaks to the author's deep concern for the well-being of workers and the need for a more just and equitable economic system.
Right? They seem to be constantly searching for ways to challenge the exploitative structures of capitalism and to create a world where work is not just a means to an end, but a source of fulfillment and creative expression.
Like their discussion of the concept of the bullshit job, for example.
Okay.
They offered this scathing critique of the proliferation of meaningless and soul-crushing jobs in our modern economy.
It's a powerful indictment of a system that values profit over purpose and that often leaves workers feeling alienated and unfulfilled.
And they're not just content with critiquing the status quo, they're actively seeking out those alternative models for organizing work,
Right.
models that actually prioritize worker well-being, creativity, and a sense of shared purpose.
Like their discussion of the concept of worker cooperatives, for example.
Exactly.
They offer a compelling vision of a world where businesses are owned and operated by the workers themselves, creating a more democratic and equitable workplace.
It's a powerful alternative to those traditional hierarchical structures of corporate capitalism.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that workers are not just cogs in a machine, but human beings with needs, desires, and a right to have a say in how their work is organized. My heart is swelling with a sense of hope. It feels like the author is giving us a glimpse of a world where work is not a source of drudgery and exploitation, but a meaningful and fulfilling expression of our creative potential.
And that world is not some distant utopia. It's something we can start building right now by supporting worker-owned businesses, advocating for policies that empower workers, and challenging those exploitative practices of corporate capitalism.
But before we get too carried away with our dreams of worker liberation, Let's take a step back and acknowledge those challenges of transforming the way we think about and organize work in a world that is so deeply entrenched in the logic of capitalism.
Yes, this is a crucial point. It's not easy to challenge the dominant economic system, especially when it has so much power and influence over our lives.
Right. And that's where the author's work could be incredibly valuable. Imagine a deep dive into the history and theory of alternative economic systems,
Yeah.
exploring the successes and failures of past experiments, and offering concrete suggestions for how to build a more just and sustainable economy.
That would be an amazing resource. It's about offering those practical tools and strategies for challenging the power of capital and creating a world where work is a source of dignity, purpose, and shared prosperity.
And it's also about recognizing that economic justice is not just an abstract ideal. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential.
Precisely, it's about ensuring that everyone has access to the resources and opportunities they need to live a good life, regardless of their occupation or social status.
Okay, I'm feeling incredibly inspired right now.
Yeah.
It feels like the author is giving us a vision for a world where work is not a source of division and inequality, but a force for unity and shared prosperity.
And that vision is not some pie-in-the-sky fantasy. It's something we can start creating right now by supporting worker-owned businesses, advocating for policies that empower workers, and challenging those exploitative practices of corporate capitalism.
But before we get too carried away with our dreams of economic justice, let's take a step back and acknowledge the challenges of creating a more equitable and sustainable world in the face of the growing climate crisis.
Yes, this is a crucial point that cannot be ignored. The author touches on this issue in several pieces, expressing a deep concern for the future of the planet and the need for radical action to address these environmental challenges we face.
Right. They seem to be suggesting that the climate crisis is not just an environmental issue.
Right.
It's a symptom of a deeper crisis of values, a crisis of our relationship to the natural world.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from nature, that our actions have consequences for the entire planet, and that we need to find a way to live in harmony with the natural world if we want to ensure our own survival.
And they're not just content with lamenting the state of the planet. They're actively seeking out solutions, exploring those alternative ways of living, and organizing our societies that are more sustainable and equitable.
Like their discussion of the concept of degrowth, for example.
Okay.
They offer this really compelling critique of that endless pursuit of economic growth, arguing that it's a recipe for ecological disaster.
It's a radical idea that challenges the very foundations of our current economic system.
Precisely, it's about recognizing that we can't keep consuming and producing at the current rate without destroying the planet, and that we need to find a way to live within our ecological limits.
And they're also exploring more positive and inspiring alternatives.
Yeah.
Like their discussion of the concept of regenerative agriculture.
Okay.
They offer a vision of a world where farming practices not only sustain the land, but actually help to heal and restore it.
It's a powerful example of how we can work with nature rather than against it,
Right.
to create a more sustainable and abundant future.
Okay. I'm feeling both challenged and hopeful by this analysis. It feels like the author is calling us to a deeper level of responsibility, a recognition that the choices we make today will have a profound impact on the future of the planet.
And that responsibility is not a burden, it's an opportunity to create a more just and sustainable world, a world where we live in harmony with nature and with each other.
But before we get too carried away with our visions of ecological utopia, let's take a step back and acknowledge the challenges of transforming our relationship to the natural world.
Yeah.
In a society that is so deeply entrenched in this logic of consumerism and endless growth.
Yes, this is a crucial point. It's not easy to change our habits, especially when those habits are so deeply ingrained in our culture and our economic system.
Right, and that's where the author's work could be incredibly valuable. Imagine a deep dive into the psychology of consumerism,
Okay.
exploring the ways that our desires are manipulated and exploited by corporations,
Yeah.
and offering concrete suggestions for how to break free from the cycle of consumption and waste.
That would be an amazing resource. It's about helping people to understand the underlying drivers of their behavior
Right.
and to empower them to make more conscious and sustainable choices.
And it's also about challenging those dominant narratives that tell us that happiness and fulfillment can be found through material possessions.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that true happiness comes from connection, purpose, and a sense of belonging, not from the endless accumulation of stuff.
Okay. I'm feeling both convicted and inspired by this analysis. It feels like the author is calling us to a deeper level of awareness, a recognition that our choices have consequences, and that we have the power to create a more just and sustainable world.
And that power comes not just from individual action, but from collective action.
Right.
From working together to challenge those systems and structures that perpetuate inequality and environmental destruction.
Right. It's about building movements, organizing communities, and demanding change from those in power.
And it's about recognizing that we're not alone in this struggle.
Hmm.
You know, there are countless people all around the world who are working to create a better future, and by joining forces, we can amplify our impact.
Okay, my heart is swelling with a sense of hope and possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the author is giving us this vision for a world where we live in harmony with nature, with each other, and with ourselves.
And that vision is not some distant utopia. It's something that we can start creating right now.
Right.
By making conscious choices, building communities, and demanding change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this thought. We've explored so many fascinating ideas, from the playful potential of mutant powers to the complexities of love, from the dignity of work to the challenges of consumerism. And it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of what the author could explore.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? These writings are like a springboard. They launch us into a whole universe of ideas.
Yeah.
And it's up to each of us to continue that exploration. Exactly. So, dear listener, if you could ask the author just one question inspired by this deep dive, what would it be? What new avenue would you encourage them to explore? What burning question are you left with?
Because the journey doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. And who knows what incredible discoveries await us along the way.